Right. Morning, everyone. Welcome to Babergh Planning Committee. I will now hand over to the Governance Officer to read out the domestic arrangements and the fire regulations. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Chair. Please ensure that you maintain social distancing from all other persons whilst in the chamber and in the communal areas. Please ensure that you wear a face covering at all times unless you are sitting down or if you are exempt from doing so, and that you use the hand sanitizer and wipes provided. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Please do not interrupt other speakers or hold separate conversations whilst others are speaking. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off. We will be using the e-voting for this meeting on the Modern Gov app, so please could members make sure they are logged in and ready to use the app. If you hear the fire alarm, leave the building immediately via fire exit and make your way to the assembly point, which is Ipswich Town Football Ground. Follow the signs directing you to the fire exit at each end of the floor. Do not enter the atrium. If you are in the atrium at the time of the alarm, follow the signs to the nearest fire exit. Use the stairs, not the lifts, and do not re-enter the building until told it is safe to do so. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be recorded, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being recorded. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Claire. Officer is Mark Russell. Our legal advisor, Ian Dupre. Our case officers, Elizabeth Flood and Rose Walton. Fine. Apologies for absence and substitutions.
None received, Chair.
None received. Okay. Declarations of interest. Are there any to declare? No. Thank you. Oh yes. Councillor Ayres.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that my sister-in-law is the actual manager of Shotley Marina. So, obviously, no
pecuniary
but I
interest.
just need to tell you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Am I switched on? Have you heard it? Sorry, Claire. This one. Indeed, Chairman, Councillor Ayres spoke to me briefly before the meeting. It's a straightforward non-pecuniary interest that happening to having a family member, not a close family member, linked in that way. That's properly declared. We can carry on without worries.
Okay, thank you. Any others? No? Right. Moving on. Have you all received the minutes of the last meeting? Are there any points of accuracy in the minutes that someone would like changed? If not, can I have a proposer? Thank you, Adrian. Councillor Osborne. A seconder? Councillor Beer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, if you go to the plus sign in the top right-hand corner of your app and select attendance and voting, this vote should now be in progress. Councillor Beer, can I take your vote, please? Thank you. Thank you, members. Chair, that's 10 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Sure it's 10 or 11?
It's 11. Thank you, sir. Councillor.
Didn't count me. Oh dear. Make me feel left out. So. Right. To receive notification petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received.
Thank you. Site inspections. We have a request for a site visit which will be presented by Rose Walton. Rose, would you like to carry on, please?
Thank you. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. A site visit has been requested for this site, which is the land south of Honeysuckle Cottage in Holbrook. The application is hybrid, seeking outline permission for the erection of 4 self-built dwellings, with all matters reserved other than access, and full planning permission for the erection of 4 two-bedroom dwellings, with associated landscaping, vehicle access off Hms Lane, and pedestrian access to Church Hill. The site visit has been requested because there is concern regarding the rural character of Hms Lane, impact to the AONB, highway safety and use, as well as contrary to policies within the core strategy and policies within the Babergh Local Plan and the MPPF. There's also concern raised regarding the proximity of the fire station and its activity, as well as SIL monies. Next slide, please, Emily. This is the site highlighted in yellow for you, with the fire station adjacent on the right-hand side there. Next slide, please. This is the village of Holbrook. The site is highlighted by the yellow star. This just shows you the site's proximity to the rest of the village. Next slide, please. Just for a bit of context, this is the proposed layout. You can see the proposed vehicle access on the south side of the site, off of Hms Lane, and the pedestrian access on the northeast side, adjacent to Jubilee House at the top there. Next slide, please. Starting off with some photos on the site itself. The image on the left-hand side shows where I was approximately standing when the photo was taken, which is highlighted by the yellow star. And the direction of the photo was taken in. So this photo was taken looking north into the site. You can see the fire station drill tower on the right-hand side there. Next slide, please. This is another image from within the site. It's looking towards the western boundary, which is natural hedgerow and trees. Next slide, please. This photo is taken slightly further into the site, looking towards the eastern boundary, towards the fire station. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to travel any deeper into the site. As you can see, it's heavily overgrown with brambles. And these photos are up to date, taken on Sunday, the 17th of October. Next slide, please. This photo shows the view from the proposed access site down onto Hms Lane. You can see the existing dwellings on the south side of the road, just there. Next slide, please. This is a view looking eastwards on Hms Lane. You can see the proposed vehicle access site on the left-hand side there. Next slide, please. This is a view standing from on Hms Lane, looking into the site from the proposed vehicle access site. You can see the drill tower there. Next slide, please. This is a view looking west on Hms Lane. You can see the proposed vehicle access site on the right-hand side there. Next slide, please. And this is a view looking from further up Hms Lane, looking west. You can see part of an existing dwelling on the south side of Hms Lane. Next slide, please. This is a view looking west down Hms Lane. It's from the junction between Hms Lane and Church Hill. You can see how it turns into a single lane road, just a bit further into the road. Next slide, please. This is a view looking west down Hms Lane from Church Hill. Next slide, please. This is a view looking towards the drill tower from the junction between Hms Lane and Church Hill. Next slide, please. And this is a view from Church Hill looking at the proposed location of the pedestrian access. The plant life and tree area that you can see there would be removed to make way for the pedestrian access. Next slide, please. And this is a view from a little further up Church Hill, looking south towards the proposed pedestrian access site, which is where that greenery is that you can see, which is proposed to be removed. And I think that's it. I think, do you just want to check the next slide? Yeah, that was it. Thank you.
The opposite.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, Rose. Don't make me chuckle. Sorry. Rose, if we're being asked to go on a site visit for this, I know there's 4 dwellings, so that would normally be officer delegation. So does... There it is. Well, thank you very much. So does that suggest then that there's been a call in for referral, and if so, what's the policy reason for that, please?
This application wasn't called into committee by a ward member. It was under Phil's decision that it's controversial. It's received a number of objections from local residents.
Well, Councillor Parker, as he got in first, has asked my question, so I'm really haven't got one.
Well, yes, that was the same question. Thank you, Councillor Parker. I want to know who called
But
it.
I might.
I've got a different question, Chair. The members are talking about 4 houses, but from what I could gather from what you're talking about there's 4 self-builds and 4 with full permission. So that's 8 houses in total.
Yes, that's right. It's a hybrid application.
So there's 8 houses, not 4 on the site. Okay.
Any other questions? Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, it's not a question. I would propose that we do have a site visit to this. Obviously, from the undulations, although excellent, the pictures we've seen, the undulations in there and the highways issues, I think we should be there to have a look at it.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Do I have a seconder? Councillor McLaren? Okay, Councillor Ayres then.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I second Councillor Osborne's suggestion. As a child who grew up there, I know the area very well and I fully endorse a site visit. Thank you.
Councillor McLaren, you
I just make a comment, Chair. The reason my request was more to do with the width of the country lane and the access of...
So are you saying you did request a site?
I did.
Chairman, if I may, I think if I've understood correctly, Mr. Isbell thinks it should come to this committee anyway, but Councillor McLaren has asked for a site visit
as well. No.
Because, Mr. Chairman, sorry to come in.
Right.
That was my question, who actually called for it. I mean, I'm more than happy if it was the Chief Planning Officer, but I'm even more happier that it was the local member. So I do think it's important we do know that. Thank you.
I think what happened is one got in before the other. They both started the process at the same time. Councillor Hind.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Based on what the officers said about her difficulty in getting any further onto the site than where she took the photographs from, and the excellent range of photographs that she's taken showing the I think, highways issues and access problems quite succinctly. So I don't know that there's any need for us to go out there when all we're going to do is to stand where those photographs were taken and see the same thing.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments from anyone? Councillor Busby.
If we go, perhaps we could take an Erwinton at the same time.
Taking what?
Erwinton at the same time, however you want to pronounce it.
I still can't hear you.
There is a controversial planning application about 4 miles down the road that we ought to consider looking at. Erwinton.
I don't know what. Erwood.
Also Rose application.
Would you want to combine them together?
Well, I think we should. I say it's only about 2 or 3 miles down the road, and it is even more controversial than this one.
Well, hang on. Deal with that, okay? The answer to your question is no. Councillor Beer.
Chair, I think
So
Councillor
could
Barrett
I-
didn't hear what was said there. It's the Erwinton Site, Councillor Barrett, that we were just... The Erwinton Site was the second site that has been proposed to visit. It's a couple of miles away. It's Erwinton Hall, is it called? Next to Erwinton Hall.
No, we haven't got it. It's not there at the
Any
moment.
knowledge of it?
No.
So how can we determine it without any knowledge?
Can't.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could I ask, as the local member called it in, what the reasons were? Can you explain, just tell us why you'd like us to go there? Because I think it's important to know that.
Sorry, Chair, thank you. I'll address Councillor Beer's question. This has been to planning, came to the planning department before and was refused. And it's the access, for me, the major difficulty is the access. As you can see, it's a one-car width, and even at present, people on the left-hand side, the residents, people park in their driveways to allow oncoming traffic. So if that had traffic from a site and the increased traffic from other houses, I think it would pose a real risk to the safety, not just of the people opposite, but the pedestrians, a lot of walkers, a lot of dog walkers, and I mean it's a nightmare if there's a lorry or something going down there. So I think it's very unsafe. Thank you.
Any other comments? If not, we have a proposal and a seconder. Can I ask you to conduct a vote, please, Claire?
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress. Councillor Beer, can I take?
For the site inspection.
Thank you.
I can't get anything.
Now in progress. Sorry, members.
How are we doing?
Waiting on two people. Thank you, members. Chair, that's 8 votes for, 2 against and 1 abstention, so that's carried.
Thank you.
Chair, can we have 2 minutes? We've just got to swap something over on the system, so if we can just have
Can we just have
2
1
minute
minute to say that this most... Councillor McLaren, you would like the site visit to be... Next Wednesday's the date of the site visit. You would prefer it in the afternoon? Does that cause anyone any problems? Okay, thank you. Yes, please. So that site visit will be 2 o'clock next week. Councillor McLaren recommends that you park in Churchill, and this will come out in the notification from the Governance Officer. Thank you. Now, have a site visit. Are we all set? Right, moving on. Schedule of planning applications. There's been agreed to have a change in the running order, and so we will kick off with DC 20-04309 Shotley Marina. And Rose, yet again, this is your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. The application we have before us today is a Section 73 to vary Condition 2 approved plans and documents for B13-01384 at Shotley Marina, King Edward VII Drive in Shotley. The proposal seeks to amend the layout and appearance but retain the quantum of development of 19 residential units and mixed-use commercial space on the ground floor. Next slide, please. Shotley is a hinterland village as identified within the Babergh core strategy, which accommodates some development to help meet the needs within the village. Next slide, please. This presentation should be considered in conjunction with the committee report, which should be available to you. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The proposal concerns the principle of development, the design, impact on heritage assets and ecology. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, just for a bit of context, this is the built-up area boundary of Shotley Gate as currently within the Babergh local plan. The site in question is highlighted in yellow there, so you can see currently it is outside of the built-up area boundary. Next slide, please. This is the built-up area boundary as proposed in the emerging joint local plan. So you can see that it is proposed to be inside the built-up area boundary. It should be noted that the principle of development for this application is already established by grant of permission of the previous planning application. Therefore, the principle and location won't be considered any further. The key tests are determining the impact of the alternative architectural response on the character and appearance of the area and the setting of the nearby heritage assets. Next slide, please. This plan shows the constraints relating to the site. You can see the purple area, which is the conservation area. The site is highlighted in yellow. The orange marked areas are Grade 2 listed heritage assets, and the green area is the AONB boundary. Next slide, please. Just a bit of location context. The site is highlighted by the yellow star. Shotley Battery, adjacent to the northwest. The settlement of Shotley Gate to the west. Harwich Harbourside to the south, and Felixstowe to the east. Next slide, please. Okay, just going to take you through the proposal itself now. This just shows you the site itself and its proposed layout. This is the ground floor plan. So the Hms Ganges Museum would be on the left-hand side, and the remainder of units to be commercial space. There will be parking out the front and rear, just as there is currently and as proposed in the original planning application. Okay, next slide, please. This is the first floor plan, 7 units of 2-bedroom flats with balconies and lifts. Next slide, please. Second floor plan, 7 units again with 2 bedrooms, the same as the first floor. Next slide, please. And this is the third floor plan, 5 units, 4 of which would have 2 bedrooms, and 1 with 3 bedrooms that you can see on the left-hand side there. Okay, next slide, please. This is the front elevation, which would face east. The top drawing is what is currently proposed, and the bottom drawing is what has been approved under the previous application. Next slide, please. Sorry, can you just go back one slide? Thank you. This is the rear elevation, which would face west. Again, the top drawing is what's currently proposed and the bottom is what has previously been approved. Next slide, please. This is the south-facing side elevation, which would have the Hms Ganges Museum attached to it. The left-hand side drawing is what is currently proposed, and the right-hand side is what has previously been approved. Next slide, please. This is the north-facing side elevation. Again, the left-hand side drawing is what's currently proposed, and the right-hand side is what has been approved previously. Next slide, please. This just shows you the difference in heights of what is currently proposed and what has been approved previously. Following discussions with Historic England, the originally proposed building has been reduced in height, and now there is only a 245mm difference between the proposal and what has previously been approved. Next slide, please. Okay, moving on to heritage. These images show the views of the proposed and previously approved buildings from across Shotley Battery. The drawing on the right-hand side shows where the viewpoint is from, which is highlighted by the yellow star, and where the site is. As you can see, there would be no adverse difference from the previously approved and the proposed. Next slide, please. Sorry, can you just go back one? Thank you. This is another view from Shotley Battery again. You can see there would be no adverse difference from the proposal and previous. Next slide, please. This is a view from Harwich Harbour side. You can see the previous and the proposal there, so there would be no adverse difference. Next slide, please. This is a view from Langar Point in Felixstowe. You can see the previous and the proposal both there. As you can see, there wouldn't be any adverse difference. Next slide, please. Both the Heritage Team and Historic England were consulted during the course of determination. Following engagement with both consultees, the height of the building was reduced to what you've seen today, and there is no objection raised. The visualisations that you just saw demonstrate that the revised scheme would not obscure the horizon when viewed from the top of Shotley Battery, would retain views of the battery on the bluff when looking from Harwich Harbour side, and would not impact in any way the view of the monument from Langar Point. The Heritage consultees agree that the proposal's impact is negligible and the level of harm to the significance of the monument is no longer greater than that of the consented scheme. Next slide, please. Just a couple of ecology points. The applicant has provided a report of mitigation measures to any potential impact to overwintering birds, and Place Services Ecology were consulted during the course of determination. No objection has been raised, subject to ecological mitigation and enhancement measures and a financial contribution towards the Suffolk Coast Grounds, which all can be dealt with via condition. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Negotiations will take place of the completion of a Section 106 deed of variation to ensure that obligations attached to the original application, Section 106, are carried forward. Next slide, please. Just take through a couple of photos. This is the site with the access and parking area. You can see the museum there. Next slide, please. Another shot of the museum and the commercial space, and from another viewpoint, the commercial space and parking areas. Next slide, please. The recommendation is approval, subject to completion of a deed of variation. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose. Any questions for the officer? Councillor Beer.
Yes, I've got two questions, please. Slide 26, can you put that back up? Is that, I believe you said it was the site. Is that the whole site, or is that the size of the building?
Yes, so those are CGI visualisations showing what the proposed building would look like from Harwich Harbour side.
Is that the whole site of the building, that sort of line, or is that the site?
Yes, so that shows the site of the building itself.
So the site is larger than that?
Yes, the site itself covers more ground than the building.
And the second question then, the parking, there's 19 dwellings, the same as before. How many parking spaces is there? Is that the same? I can't remember. I assume that was 36
It would be
or 38, was it?
the same, yes, as the original application.
And
there's no difference in
Is it
parking.
38?
I believe that it is 38, but the agent is here to answer some more specific
I'll find
questions.
out then. Thank you.
Councillor Ayres.
Thank you, Chair. Is the Shipwreck pub still there?
Yes, it is still there.
Still running?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Busby.
Just to clarify, on slide 23, I think, do you say that the new proposal is 245 millimetres or centimetres, whatever it is, higher or lower?
Higher.
It is higher?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And if you could go to slide 19. They're for the same number of units. It almost looks as though the proposed one is twice the size of the previous one. How on earth did we get 19 units in the existing one?
Chair, those aren't at the same scale. If you look on the top one, you can see the red line, which shows the outline of the that's that which has been permitted already.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, well.
It just shows the different design, but you're right, yeah, they're not exactly the same scale, but the red line does tell the story.
Councillor Parker.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. And Rose, I really apologise if I'm being more than dim here, but so the key difference is an increase in the overall building height of 245 millimetres. So that's increasing it. But it's to be noted that the applicant originally proposed an overall building height of 18.65. So is it getting higher? Is it getting shorter?
So originally the building proposed was much higher than what we've seen today. Due to engagement with Historic England, the height has been reduced significantly.
Any other questions? Councillor Barrett.
It doesn't make it clear on these, on going back to 19, what happens to the Shotley Museum, because the scale is so different. So does the Shotley Museum, looking at the top one, where's the Shotley Museum in relation to that?
It's still on the left-hand side there, the
So
single story.
if I went to the bottom one, the Shotley Museum is still in situ as it is on the bottom.
The Shotley Museum was always proposed to be replaced with the original application.
So it's out.
It will still be there on the ground floor level.
You see, these illustrations are not very clear, are they? Because it looks like, if you look at it, it looks like it's been removed.
What's that bit? Is that
Okay.
Well, but is it?
Thank you.
It's not there.
Thank you.
Can I ask the question then, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go on.
Is the end bit, if you can move your mouse along and wiggle it, right, that's the museum bit. Now go to the top one. Is that the bit there? Is that it still?
Yes, that would be where the museum is.
I think you need to make this very clear to us.
Is that new
Yep.
build?
One at a time, please.
Yes, the museum is to be replaced. If we could go to slide 20, please. That shows you the Hms Ganges Museum there on that side elevation.
That's absorbed into the new build, but on the original one, it's not.
It was always proposed to be replaced.
So to understand this correctly, what you're saying is that on the original, they hadn't yet included a new build for the Shotley Museum, but it is included in the later application.
Yes, you can see on both drawings there that the Hms Ganges Museum is highlighted.
Okay.
So where would that be on the existing planning commission?
It's to remain in the same location as it is currently. It won't move. It's just to be replaced.
Okay.
Am I missing something? Sorry. So
Is that a new... Councillor Barrett.
Well, hang on a sec. This is important. So is it actually a new build in its lower form as per the proposed elevation? Because I'm sorry, it's not very clear.
Sorry, Councillor Barrett. Yes, both schemes were both new build, everything new build. Correct, Rose? The old museum buildings you saw on the other slide was to be removed for both schemes.
Thank you.
But the problem is, why is then, on the west elevation previously approved, are we showing that section to the left in those pictures? Because it's not a new build, is it? I mean, it's greyed out, so that's to me is like an existing building.
Sorry, some part of the building, if we can go back to the first floor plans. Yeah, the ground floor.
So it's existing retained. It said
yes,
on
so
the
if
thing
we,
there, look,
yes,
existing
so
retained.
some of the building is to be retained, but that's not the Hms Ganges Museum.
That is the existing retail units, is it?
Yes, that's some retail on the other side.
Okay. May I suggest that we get the agent to clarify some of these points after his presentation? Everybody's agreeable? We'll do that. And any more questions for the officers? If not, I'll ask, as there's no parish council or objector or a supporter, I'll ask the agent, Craig Weston, to address us. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, Councillors. The real purpose for me attending today on behalf of the applicant, Shotley Marina, was not necessarily to give you 3 minutes of speech, because Rose's presentation has quite succinctly presented the variation, but it has flagged up a couple of questions, obviously, from the committee, so I wanted to be available to answer those questions. Sorry,
Some are a bit deaf, Craig. Do you mind just talking into the stick? Thanks.
I shall shout up. I was really here to answer any questions. Hopefully you can all hear. And I think I can probably answer some of those questions by asking slide 18 to be presented once I finish, which is the front elevation. Rose made a slight error when she was describing the elevations in the presentation. The front elevation will show clearly where Hms Ganges is, and I think that's caused some of the confusion. But really, I'm here to answer any questions from the panel.
Yes, I'll put the same question I put to our officers. The car parking situation, is there 38 spaces provided, more or less?
There will be the same. It will be the same as what was approved. There's no change to the car parking provision.
Unfortunately, I can't remember what it was.
I don't have that data to hand, but it will be the same. There's no change in respect of parking provision.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, we must have it. Somebody should be able to tell me the amount of parking spaces.
I'll look through the documents, Councillor Pearce, if I can find it.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions for the agent? Councillor Hinton.
Yes, looking at both the designs, both the approved and the proposed alternative, bearing in mind this is right beside the seaside, won't burst into song or anything like that, but which one of those designs is more or less likely to encourage or discourage seagulls nesting? Because you can't remove them once they're there. So what proposals are being put in place to stop them from getting there in the first place?
Seagulls are a force of nature. You can deter, but no, there are certain protection measures you can put on gutters, ridges, but there's no difference between the two as to what would attract more or less. There's an existing building with an existing roofscape which already accommodates a number of seagulls.
Baron.
I rather like the first design, and looking at the what I would sort of gets to almost East European block design for the a more upmarket East European block, but East European government building that is coming in place. Is this sort of a cost exercise, or is it because on the design you've definitely got a far more interesting design than the first one?
Design is subjective, of course.
It is.
And part of the reason for this variation, well, personally, I think that the scheme that was originally presented and has since been reduced was more attractive. But we've reduced to accommodate heritage comments. So that had some pitched gables, which is more reflective of the development completed at Admiralty Pier. Well, of course. I mean, you know, this is residential development. It's not bespoke one-off homes. So yes, there is always a degree of viability involved.
Thank you. Councillor Rose.
Yes, thank you very much. Practical question that occurred to me because I live in a first floor flat, carrying down my rubbish to the dustbin. Will there be any waste disposals like they have in other countries? Because it's quite a high building. It's just a practical question because it can be difficult. Thank you.
The flats are provided with a refuge store. Each group of flats is provided with a lift, which, from recollection, wasn't included in the original, so that has been added as a benefit to all of those units. So they all have lift access to whichever flat, and they can deposit in a centralised bin store.
Any other question? Councillor Beer.
Mr. Chairman, I may be totally wrong here, and I'll wait to be corrected by yourself. But the pier, which I'm going from memory when we've been there on a site inspection, is that receiving any assistance from you as a developer to improve that? Because that's quite near to the site, if I remember rightly, is it not? Was that part of any of the original agreements that we done for the development there? No. I'm getting a shake from the local member that no, that's not so. I'll just drop the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Owen.
Thank you. We talk about the height and everything, but we haven't talked about the width. Is that any longer, or is that the same size? Thank you.
Yes. So, as identified on the elevations and the plans, the overall width of development has increased. The height is increased marginally, but only in ridge locations. The majority of the building is the same or below the approved height. Sorry, a bit closer. And the overall width has been increased to basically accommodate the lifts, but also to provide wider individual flats, essentially. And as a consequence, that provides additional ground floor accommodation for increased amount of commercial activity and for a larger Hms Ganges facility, the museum facility.
Yeah, thank you for that, because I'm quite impressed that you have got lifts in, because not many flats do have lifts. So I think that's quite a good thing. Just a comment that.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Weston, who were the where's the marketplace for this these new flats, who are you planning on targeting to come into the area? I mean, are they local people or people, sailors? Who's the marketplace?
Yeah, well, the market is the open market, so whoever wants to buy one of those homes can. They don't necessarily need to have a local connection. There's no restriction on the previous approval in that respect. There is a market demand, and that is why the applicant is bringing this site forward and is very keen to bring this forward. The recent development at Shotley Lodge and the Admiralty Pier, completed by the applicant, has demonstrated that need, and that has driven this slight variation in terms of the unit layout. So we've taken that market feedback from the previous developments to guide this variation.
So can I ask another question? Have we any idea what sort of income is going to come into the Shotley Peninsula as a result of this?
In short, no, I can't put a figure to that. Yes, there will be additional construction labour there. There will be additional foot traffic for continued use of shipwreck, but it's all fairly speculative, not a tangible sum that I can put a number to.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions? Councillor Busby.
I'm still confused as to why the style change. Can you tell me what the driving force was? Who said, I don't like what we've proposed, we need to come up with something fresh?
Well, obviously, it is partly construction related in terms of the cost of construction. It is also as I say, this is a variation to the original elevations that we presented. We did have a series of gables, which we thought sat very comfortably there, but those would have been much higher, and that's what caused the concern from Historic England. We therefore adjusted and took our cue from previous developments that have been completed, so the Shotley Lodge and the Peninsula development include these sort of monopitches, but also gables. So that's the sort of the drive that's sort of taken it to this point.
What's the difference in sustainability and energy conservation?
Well, none is proposed in the sense that that's not part of this application, but the development will be constructed to current standards in terms of building regulations, which in effect is going to be an improvement based on the if had it been constructed under the previous guise.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Weston. Perhaps you'll hang on and see if there's any more questions for you. Thank you very much. I will now ask the ward member, Councillor Davis, to speak. You have 5 minutes, Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I won't take up your whole 5 minutes. But the question I think you're asking is, what does the extra 9 3/4 inches actually mean to the site? Well, I can tell you, when the first proposals came in to convert this and permission was granted, and a closer inspection raised concerns within the Hms Ganges Museum that the way that the level was going to be is that the actual museum height was going to be lowered. Well, fine in a lot of ways, it has an awful lot of exhibits, but one of the main exhibits is an 8-foot-high Indian prince head, which is the original Hms Ganges figurehead. So Hms Ganges volunteers really wanted this to be kept, and there were all sorts of things coming in. And when they decided to change the designs somewhat, it was to raise that level for the Hms Ganges Museum so it would accommodate the figurehead. Of course, that's not the overriding reason. Councillor McCarran asks about the people that are coming in there. It's been a mix. We know from Shotley Lodge and from Admiralty Pier that the mix is both newcomers, sailors, who have yachts in the marina, and obviously the big prevalence now is people that don't want to work in London all the time. They work from home, so therefore they need a little bit more space in those apartments, flats, whatever you want to call them. And that 9 3/4 inches helps enormously in terms of that increase in that size. The need has been filled. Both the Admiralty Pier, all sold, most of them off-site even before they were completed. Same with Shotley Lodge, all sold. The change in the design, to answer that question, fits in with the two developments at Shotley Lodge and Admiralty Pier, and possibly another one coming forward as well. So that's part of that as well. And actually, I don't think the illustrations do it justice, personally, judging by the other two developments that have been completed and filled. So the 9 3/4 inches, hugely important to Hms Ganges Museum, and of course that has a knock-on effect to all the others. The width, you say, with the lifts as well, making it more convenient. The car parking, not only is there car parking for the residents, I believe you're right, I think it is 38, but I don't have that figure in front of me, but there's also a large car parking for the public as well to fit in, and then a separate car parking for the yacht holders, the berth holders at the marina. So I fully endorse. I think the officers got this absolutely spot on. It's been a bit of a battle with Historic England, who didn't actually come out there, but made their comments initially, and then they've changed it. The applicant has done everything they can to make this an acceptable scheme, and as has been pointed out, the permission has already been granted. It's just that other 9 3/4 inches that you're given a nod to. That's it. Thank you.
Any questions, Councillor Beer?
Well, I would just like to thank Councillor Davies because it's answered most of my questions in what you've just said. It's obvious that size does matter, and having said that, you've explained the park, and I'm more than happy. Thank you.
You have an answer?
Yeah, I have the answer to the parking question. The scheme, as shown on the submitted documents, indicates 44 spaces plus 3 disabled spaces. In terms of the standards, we'd look at 225% provision, so 2 for each dwelling, 25, a quarter of a space per dwelling for a visitor, which takes you to 42.75. So it's slightly in excess of the standards by 1 space plus 3 disabled spaces.
I'm very pleased to hear that. So obviously it's 2 spaces per dwelling, and we've got more. So it's the right direction, but we could have had more also. But Councillor Davies says that we've got the additional car parking for the museum, so that would help. Because out of hours, I suppose that could be used.
Right. There's no more questions. Thank you, Councillor Davies. I will now open the debate. Would anyone like to start? Councillor Beer, go on.
Well, yes, I'll go. Well, certainly, we've already approved this, and this has come back just for these minor amendments. I'm more than happy. I think all the concerns have been addressed. Yes, I think I did like the design of the original one, but I prefer the new one with the museum bit added in there and shown, because that makes it look better. So I'm more than happy to recommend to move the officer's recommendation.
You have a second? Councillor Parker, do you wish to speak?
Only just to concur with everything that Councillor Beer has just said there, actually. Yep, design, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, etc. So we'll all have an opinion on that. And at first glance, yeah, the original design looks nice. But it's actually relatively straightforward, this one, Chair, so happy to second.
Thank you. Councillor McLaren.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment, Chair. As a fellow member of ward member on Shotley Peninsula, we welcome anything that brings tourists and increases the income of the peninsula, and I think this is a very good scheme, so I just wanted to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Owen, did you want to? No. Oh, fine. Fine. No more comments?
I will make a comment as we're in debate. I have to say, I think it's a shame that the initial design has been compromised to actually put in really quite an ordinary looking block as opposed to something that was actually quite stunning, and in that position it did sort of probably get through planning on the basis that it was actually that sort of design. So I'm a bit disappointed. I understand fully that clearly costs, come into this, but it is a shame when we get an initial design which is very, very sort of appropriate, I think, and marina-ish, and then we get something which could be anywhere. But I don't feel strongly enough to vote against it, but I do feel that it's a shame that these things come back and then are compromised.
Thank you. Councillor Ayres.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I totally agree with the other councillors about approving. I'm not quite sure how long ago they were erected, maybe Councillor Davis, but there are barriers all the way along the King Edward VII Drive, which is much safer. That access along there, how long has that has made a big difference to access?
Yeah, it's possibly been about 10 years now. It seems surprising, but you're absolutely right. It was a nightmare, especially in the dark. And if you'd had a couple at the shipwreck, it was extremely so the whole area has been regenerated, and I would welcome Councillor Barrett and others to come down and actually have a look to see what the developers have done so far. Yeah. Well, no, but you haven't seen how all the changes. Because if you had, you would see Shotley Lodge and Admiralty Pier, the differences that's made. And just, if I may, Chair, if indulge, just answer Councillor Beer's point about the pier. It's quite a distance away, about 150 metres, something like that. But Admiralty Pier Development has done work on their own pier, not the Shotley Pier. That's a separate thing. And that looks a lot better already, and there's still more to do on that. But it does look, the whole front looks better, especially, as you say, with it's like a promenade now, and railings and everything. Looks great.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Just to make sure that Councillor Davis makes sure that I'm fully up to speed, I have a friend who's just bought number 1 Admiralty, and I had cocktails and drinks looking over the port of Harwich and Felixstowe less than 2 weeks ago.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett.
So just to make sure you just know I'm totally up to speed with what's going on down there.
I don't think your social life is part of a planning matter. Councillor Hinton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick point of clarification, really, if I could ask one. And that is that this application is B/13 when it was approved, which presumably means 2013. It was approved or dated in 2016, which seems a bit of a long time to get something that's been submitted to get it actually put into a right format. And the expiry date was the 26th of February 2021. So is this an application due to the fact that the original one has expired and has to be redone? Or what goes on there?
Correct me if I'm wrong.
The history is so complicated. As
73A.
Pages are.
It's a 73A variation of condition, which means that the development has commenced already. The A means it has commenced already. Yep.
Thank you. No, if not, I'll ask Claire to conduct a vote, if you would be so mind. You're happy with the proposal, say, as officer's recommendation? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress in your app. Councillor Beer. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. That's 11 votes for. That's
11 votes for. Right. Thank you very much. I may suggest we have a 5-minute break before we take on the next application. And please, may I remind you, this week we are due out of here at 12 o'clock. So Thank you for turning me on. Go on, get back. Right. We're looking now at DC 2104658, land between Popkiln Road and Raiden Way, Great Cornard. I must at this stage ask Councillors Beer and Barrett whether they will be staying on the committee or talking as a ward member. Thank you, Councillor Beer. Councillor Barrett?
I'll stay on.
Grudgingly, thank you. Thank you very much. Right. Moving on, I'll ask Elizabeth Flood to present the application.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an application for the erection of 5 dwellings. It's come to committee because the applicant is Babergh District Council. You should be aware that we have received a late representation, which is an objection due to the loss of open space. So this is the site here. It's on the corner of Popkiln Road along here and Raiden Way along here. This is Stevenson. This is Shawlands Avenue along here, the main road into the site. And you'll notice that it's a small area of open space currently. You'll also notice opposite the site is a further area of open space with a mugger and some play equipment. It's another site location plan. So this is the site as it is. It's existing sort of informal access for maintenance. And then these are the dwellings on Popkiln Lane. On this end, they are all bungalows. And then this is the greater area of Great Cornard. This is the constraints map. As you'll see, this site in the local plan was not designated as an open space. But that was the case for the majority of open space within Great Cornard and the urban areas. Okay, this shows the site layout. So it's a proposal for 5 dwellings, 5 bungalows, 2 here, and then a row of 3 here. They would all be 2-bedroom bungalows, and they would all be affordable tenure. And you can see a small area of open space would be retained with some trees, and then this bit of open space next to it would also be retained. Now, we will come back to the elevations and drawings of these, but one of the key issues is the loss of open space, and the NPPF does say you need to assess whether, if you're going to lose open space, whether it's no longer required. So I just wanted to point out a few things. This is the site here. So this is the open space assessment that's been recently completed as part of the evidence base for the JLP. So it is, this is a document that so we have assessed these sites, and you can see opposite is the existing sort of recreation area with the play equipment. You'll also notice up here is the Shawland Wood Nature Reserve. Now, this sets out the open space assessment for Great Cornard, and it does show a deficit of 5.7 hectares of amenity open space. So if we lost this space, that would be another further loss of open space. However, on doing the open space assessment, what it doesn't take into account is the accessible natural green space, which, as you can see, Great Cornard has 27 hectares. And that's, as you'll see, there's 2 areas of accessible open green natural space. There's Shawlands Wood just along the road from the site, and the Great Cornard Country Park. So although it looks initially like this will further a loss of amenity space, it should be taken into account that this doesn't include this amenity space does not include other space that is available, principally the the shorelands would, just on the edge, and also the fact that the recreation ground is opposite the site, which provides much better facilities. So this is the street scene. So this would be plot 5, 4 and 3. As you can see there, the bungalows with cars and carports. Again, this is looking up the site. This is the boundary here. So this is plots 3, 4 and 5, the terrace. And then this is looking into the site. So this is plot 1, curving round. These are the elevations. There's quite simple bungalows to fit in with what there is existing. And then this is the sort of terrace of 3 with the linked detached ones. These are the floor plans, so they're all 2-bed, another 2-bed, and then these. Okay, so this is the site as it is. So as you can see, it's this area of green space. There's a couple of smaller areas within the edge, and this end here would be the open space to provide a bit more, to provide some landscaping. Again, this is looking to the site from Shorelands Avenue. You can see the playground sign. The playground is literally on this side, just opposite. And again, this is looking from the parking area of the playground through the site onto the properties on Potkiln Road. So there they are. Again, this is looking at the site. As you can see, it's just simple mown grass. It's got very little recreation value. It's got no facilities or seats or anything. Again, that's looking up Potkiln Road with the site on the right. You can see the existing access, where the new access would be. Again, you can see that access that is used for a bit of informal parking at the moment, and the site. So this hedging would be removed, but there would be more hedging placed. Again, you can see the site. This is from the playground, and again, this is looking up. So this is a neighbour. This is the site behind these trees, and you can just see the road curves around like that, and you can see the mugger just there. And this is looking up Potkiln Road. You can see the countryside at the end. And again, this just shows you the facilities. These are literally on the opposite side of the road, so you can see that there are good recreational facilities very nearby. So the recommendation is for is to grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Any questions for the officer? Councillor Jameson.
Thank you, Chair. So if we're going to get rid of this amenity space, whether it's used or not, have we been through the correct process in the Local Government Act to dispose of this, consulting with the public?
Yeah, in relation to Section 123 of the Local Government Act, that's not technically a planning matter, so we could give planning permission without having to do that because they're two separate legal requirements. In addition, at the moment, the proposal I understand is for the land not to be disposed of. It will be owned and managed as council housing.
But it won't be open space anymore, will it?
Yeah, that's correct. It won't be open space.
Councillor Beer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a few questions. First one, can I ask history of the site? I'm under the impression that this site came to us about 10 years ago, or around about that time. My memory's gone as you get older. Sorry? Oh, was it 1975? Right, I'll accept that. But I seem to remember that we had a public meeting in Great Cornard, or it might have been at the parish council meeting that the hall became filled because this was brought up. Now, was there a plan and application put in? I'm under the impression there was, and if so, there's no record here to the history, which concerns me.
Certainly when I looked at the history from our system, which isn't perfect, but we couldn't find that. I believe there was a proposal on that site for some sort of units on there, but I don't know whether that actually came to fruition in terms of a planning application.
Thank you. Yes, I see that, Councillor Osborne. But the point I'm getting at is that there was a request to do something on that site, and it came to, and the locals were really uptight about this. This big public meeting went on. Anyway, I'll come back to that later, but you've answered my question. So that's that one. Now, the other point was, on page 12, there under Great Cornard Parish Council, Babergh District has pre-identified this pocket of land as amenity green space, and it goes on. I haven't seen a copy of this. Is there one? Of GC 020 in their PPG 17. What's that all about?
So that is a previous open space audit that was done under the old PPGs. So it is a document that's was a previous document that's now been overtaken by this by the new open space audit that's been recently undertaken.
Thank you. Well, I think that should have been highlighted somewhere in the report, explaining that, because you know that does carry some weight locally, Mr. Chairman. Right, there was something else. Do you want to see if there's anybody else? Yeah.
Councillor Parker.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I think it's interesting to note, Elizabeth, you mentioned the email that came in last night with regards to the objection, and you mentioned that the objection with regard to the loss of amenity space. I actually interpret that objection slightly differently. I actually think overall it's an objection about process that's been employed. So I absolutely take your point that the issue of the S123 notices aren't material, or that they are material, but they're not necessarily planning matters. But can you confirm, or can anybody confirm, is there an intention to issue an S123 notice? That's the first question. Can you just tell me, bearing in mind that we've acknowledged that this is amenity space as identified in the open land assessment, so if it has been identified and you yourself said, yes, it will result in a loss of amenity space, even if it isn't formally being disposed of, do we intend to follow due process and issue an S123 notice? Can you tell us?
Yeah, Councillor, thanks. I mean, when you say we, obviously, we're the planning authority and they're the applicant. We're doing it like that, sort of Chinese walls. So if you've got any questions about that, we have a representative from the assets team who can help with that. But as far as we're concerned, it's like if there was a covenant on the land and it was a private applicant. Here's your planning permission, but if there's some other arm of law that stops you doing it, then you can't do it. You've got to sort that out as well. So that they're two different processes.
I can be heard now. Section 123 only kicks in, or only applies, if there's an intention, the precise word is to dispose of the land, but disposal means sell, convey, by conveyance, or grant a lease or tenancy other than a short tenancy. It would only be applicable if one of those things happened, not applicable when a planning application is made. So that's the legal context. You may wish to hear further from someone else on the practicalities.
Okay, well, if I can respond to that, and thank you, Mr. Dupre, but I'm still unclear then. So categorically, is the process of issuing an S123 notice applicable categorically in this situation or not? And I think it's really important because we've got to take this decision, and it has been highlighted, and it is a concern that I had thought about, and hey presto, here it is from members of the public. So categorically, do we need to issue, or does a notice need to be issued?
There is no irregularity in this committee making a decision one way or another, or planning permission being issued on the instructions of this committee without section 123 being invoked. That I can assure you of that categorically.
Yes, that reminds me of a question. I noticed here that I think it said somewhere there had been three letters are written in, and you've decided to take them as objections. And I noticed on the last application we just dealt with, there was a letter which the officers considered to be an objection. Now, can you explain to me, if somebody writes in and they disagree with what we're proposing, that's got to be an objection, surely. Why is it that we've only had 3 when I've had at least a dozen people either phone me, stop me in the street? Councillor Newman in Great Cornard has had a tremendous amount of people going to his shop concerned about it. We've told them all to write in and say what they think, and yet you're saying there's no objections, or there's 3 letters that you consider are objections. Well, I'm sorry, I don't think you have a right to decide that. I think if somebody writes in as with an objection, that should be considered an objection. Can you please explain yourselves on it?
So what we categorise, so say we got 10 letters in, some will be not for this, just for a planning application. Some will be objections, some may be supporting, and some may just be a comment. And sometimes people actually say, please do not take this as an objection. So what we do is we put so in the reports, we would put all the letters we got, and then we would say how many were objections, how many were for support. So for this planning application, and I'm happy to check if we've had anything recently. I know we've had one more objection this last night from an email. We did only get 3 written objections.
Chair, if I may, I've just checked the file, Councillor Beer. There are 3 written objections. There may be people who phoned you up, etc., but only 3 people have written in.
Extra one. So there's been 4 objections. Well, that should have, well, obviously not the last one, but that should have been made quite clear in the paperwork again, I think, Mr. Chairman, that there was 3 objections, because that made it read like there wasn't.
Well, there was. I think what you're puzzling over is why the people who came to you hadn't bothered to write in.
No, I accept what you're saying there. I think that I wish they had written in. No, when I read this, I expected to see that you'd had letters of objections from 10 residents or whatever, and this hasn't, and when I read it, there was no letters of objection. You decided that there was some that you would take as objections, and that didn't seem right to me. Thank you. I think.
Councillor Hinton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dupre can probably sort of clarify this a bit, but he came up with a load of reasons why the 1, 2, 3 notice wasn't applicable in this case, because it wasn't being disposed of, etc., etc. But where does denying access by the public to an area come into those regulations? Because effectively what we're saying here is that a piece of land that is owned by Babergh, which the public have free access to, all of a sudden is going to become a piece of land still owned by Babergh, but the public are denied access to it.
I entirely, if I may, Chairman, I entirely take Councillor Hinton's point that it is legally open to a council to take action that have practical consequences, which may be questionable or objectionable to some people, but in this instance it is not covered by section 123, which is purely a council as landowner or holder of a legal interest disposing of its land or giving somebody a lease or the legal right over it. I mean, nothing I've said so far should be seen to detract from the right of objectors, residents, whoever, to make a point about the value of open space, and it's within that the weight of that factor for this committee. Wouldn't for 1 minute wish to disrespect that point of view, but it's not. My point, I think, is section 123. I'm afraid is no assistance to people in that situation as not a procedural requirement, because planning is as members I think are well aware, experienced members of this committee, it's a process that is separate from land ownership, although there may be a practical link in 9 out of 10 cases. It's not that the two go separately.
Follow up? I could just come back and say, well, if that is the case, the 1, 2, 3 regulation doesn't apply. Presumably then paragraph 8.2 of the Babergh strategy on open spaces does apply, where it says existing provision to be protected. Starting point of any policy adopted by the council should be that all open space should be afforded protection unless it can be proved it is not required. But to develop further from that point, everybody all right, I hope? Yeah. At page 14 of the report, paragraph 1.5, the site forms an area of proposed designated open space in the Regulation 19 submission of the draft joint local plan. It then goes on page 15, paragraph 3.6, to say, the draft joint local plan has not yet been examined. Well, I think it's in the process of being examined, which significantly reduces the weight which may be afforded to it. Well, we all know that planning can be a very opaque business, and it's certainly not clear in black and white terms, but this is getting beyond anything. It's almost as if we're mixing it up to start off with before we even come to any discussion on it.
Councillor Hinton, was that a question to someone or no? Okay. All right.
In the report, contradict each other.
We'll move on. Councillor Parker, you've had your hand up some time.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that then goes on, actually, just to expand on what Councillor Hinton is saying, because, again, in the letter of objection that's come in, mention of NPPF para 99A is mentioned, and that is, that's not opaque, that is absolutely clear. Existing open space, sports and recreational buildings and land, including playing fields, should not be built on unless an assessment has been undertaken which has clearly shown the open space buildings or land to be surplus. So I think, Elizabeth, I think it was slide 7, you showed a table and a graph of land, and I think, but I need clarification on it, I think what you're saying is that despite the assessment having been taken, which does clearly show the open space is going to be built on, that there is available, I can't read it, available green space, because you are showing a deficit there. So we do need clarification. 99A is absolutely clear. If we use 99A, we're surely with this application, we're in contravention of that, are we not?
I think there are a few things. One thing is the definition of open space within the NPPF and whether this land does come under that definition because of the fact that it is very informal recreational land. Secondly, I think it also comes down to whether you consider whether that space is surplus to requirements. And I think that's based on a few things, not just the fact that it's open space, it's whether it's actually used as open space, the quality of it, and whether there's alternatives. So, as I've shown, there is an alternative use, there is a playground literally opposite the site, which probably will mean that the recreational value of this land is much less than it would be if there wasn't a playground opposite, because people are more likely to, go and play in the playground with the proper facilities than play on a piece of grass. Equally, there is other, in terms of the assessment, yes, when you look at it, amenity green space, there is a deficit, and this would increase the deficit. So if you look at it purely on that basis, yes, we're making this situation worse. But what that open space assessment doesn't take into account is the amount of accessible natural green space within Great Cornard. And I think what's particularly relevant for this application is the Shorelands Wood, which is literally, 100 metres, 200 metres from the site. So that is 27.28 worth of hectares overall that hasn't been included. If you added that, you'd probably find that the deficit, it wouldn't be as simple as just adding it to amenity green space, because amenity green space has other values that the accessible natural green space doesn't have. But in terms of strictly recreational value, as opposed to landscape value or value as a small area of green space, then that would be more than covered by the amount of accessible natural green space there is within the parish.
Thank you, Chair. In the comment by the parish council, which nobody's mentioned so far, and to me is quite important, is the availability for an air ambulance to land in an emergency. Now, in my book, that is quite an amenity for the people of Cornard. If we approved this application, were you planning to offer some alternative landing space? Looking at the site, and there is plenty of room for rotary blades to operate of a helicopter. Were you going to offer Cornard another site so the air ambulance could use that? I think it's important for the people of Cornard, and I'd be interested in that, Elizabeth. Thank you.
No, we weren't going to provide another site because it's not really a statutory thing. And we accept that, yes, the loss of this site would mean that probably the nearest site for the air ambulance to land would be the Stevenson Centre, and therefore, if there was an incident closer to this area, there would be a problem, and like the parish has said, but ultimately, it is only an emergency, so it would have to be an emergency that happened in that vicinity, as opposed to anywhere else where they would land elsewhere, such as the Stevenson Centre now. And so we have no knowledge of how many times that happens. The air ambulance itself is a charity. It could shut. It's not a statutory requirement to have an air ambulance. So it's something that's quite difficult to provide a space for something that is infrequent. And you'll need to weigh that up against the value of the land as affordable housing.
I just think it's, looking at the site, you can understand why it was chosen by the air ambulance. Because if you're looking at the other green spaces in Cornard, there probably isn't the width of space for the rotors to go round, and that is really important. Thank you.
I just picking up Elizabeth's point about the fact that there's play equipment. I think the trouble is, though, is with the site as an open space, an amenity, is very popular and used by people who walk dogs and things. So it's the fact it's an open space and not designated for any particular reason is actually why it is used as it is used. You are actually surrounded there with a and if you can, this is the question, it is a very dense populated area. So any open space for people with dogs, that's important. They don't just use play equipment. And that's where I think the amenity element is there. So I think your point about the play equipment is valid, but clearly open space is not just about play equipment. Would you agree?
Yeah, we accept that it will involve a loss of amenity land, and it's probably is, if you know what it is probably used for is dog walking, but it is not recreation. It's probably less used as recreation land for things like informal sports, because if you're going to kick a football around, you're much more likely to go opposite to the mugger than to use this piece of land.
Councillor Jameson.
Thank you. Away from the loss of the green space, I don't see any mention of the environmental, the sustainability credentials of these proper bungalows in the report. Are we building them better than required standards?
In terms of planning, we would only require the building reg standards, but I understand that the agent is here and they might be able to give you some more information about anything they've done above that.
Right, thank you. We'll move on and see if we get some more information that may help everyone. Public speakers. There is no parish council representative, no objector or a supporter. All we have is the agent, and Councillor Osborne is going to address the committee for 1 minute, and is it Lucy Smith's going to fill in the 2 minutes afterwards? Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Morning, Chairman, members. As referred...
The point of order, why is Councillor Jan Osborne addressing the committee for 1 minute, and in what capacity is she addressing this committee?
If I may, we had some discussion, so I'm sorry, I'm getting the right microphone. We had some discussion before the meeting about the precise probity of everything, and Councillor Osborne is essentially the applicant because she's the cabinet member for housing, and an applicant speaks, or they have an agent. In this case, the applicant and the agent are sharing the 3 minutes. That's the conclusion we reached, isn't it? Which is not giving the council any more advantage than a landowner would have.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne.
Thank you. As referred to on page 13 of your report, there is a significant demand for affordable rented properties in Great Cornard, with 100 entries on the register with a local connection, 21 of which are aged over 55 and 14 require adaptation to aid mobility problems. Yes, there are some concerns raised, which I fully understand, and I visited the site yesterday to take a look. However, the balance is that there are a lot of people in need of a place they can call home and that they can afford. If members are of a mind to approve this application, I would like to ask them to consider adding a condition that at least 3 of the 5 dwellings are allocated as a local connection.
Hi, my name's Lucy Smith, planner at Ingleton Wood. I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant, so thank you for the opportunity to let me speak today. So the application has been submitted as part of the wider affordable housing strategy, which includes the redevelopment of some council-owned sites. Babergh and Mid-Suffolk councils have an acute need for affordable housing, and there is a significant demand for affordable rented properties in Great Cornard specifically. As mentioned, bungalows are particularly suitable to cater for many of the people on this list.
Can you get a little bit closer to the microphone?
Yep, sorry.
I can hear you clearly, but not everyone can.
Yep. As you've heard, the proposed development comprises of 5 new affordable rent bungalows with associated parking and landscaping, including an area of open space to the west. The proposed dwellings meet the nationally described space standards and sit in generously sized plots. By virtue of the nature of the site and the existing established boundaries, there would be no adverse impact on amenity of the existing or future residents. In terms of highways, adequate visibility is provided and no concern has been raised by Suffolk County Council as Highway Authority. It is acknowledged that the existing site presents an area of green amenity space. However, the proposal has been designed to be of a lower density, single stories only, and to deliberately retain a section of open space with specimen trees, limiting the overall visual impact. In this location, where there is formal recreation area and open space in close proximity, the significant sustainable outcome of the affordable housing benefit is considered to outweigh any impact on the local character. In terms of the Government Act, which has been mentioned, I don't want to sort of repeat any of the points that have been raised, but yeah, so currently we would dispute this sort of as it's not considered that the land's being disposed of, but the applicant has been made aware of this and obviously seek sort of diligent legal advice to confirm this. So, yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Beer, you have a question.
Yes, my question is to Councillor Jan Osborne. Thank you. Normally, when we build council dwellings, they're available to anybody in Babergh District. Is that correct?
It depends on the agreement of the 106 on how those properties are going to be allocated. For example, the ones recently in Shotley, they were 3 were given up for local connection and the other ones were for Babergh wide.
My question was that normally they are not necessarily just for local people.
Only if otherwise requested.
Yes, and which is what you've done at the 11th hour, asking us now to consider approving this, and you will give the people of Great Cornard 3 dwellings, which are small bungalows. I think that is really blackmail, Mr. Chairman. If we went down that road, then all 5 should be given to the people of Great Cornard. Yes, there was a question. And so can you give all 5?
If you can, as I said in my bit, that I would suggest that at least 3. But if you want to go with 5, by all means, you can do that. It's not at the last 11 hour. That's to be agreed at a later stage with the 106 agreement.
Thank you. How much communication have you had with the parish council and the people around that area, please?
I wouldn't have had that. That would be down to the planning officers and the agent. I wouldn't have done that, and it would have been part of the consultation of the application itself.
Can someone answer the question then? How much? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
whoever wants to answer it.
So, I do know that the parish council was made aware of the application before it was submitted.
I'll come back on that one, please. We always ask this question, but how much communication have you had with them? Have you sat down? Have you talked to them about what you want to do in the parish of Cornard, please?
Sorry, no, it's just a letter in this case.
Thank you, Chair. And it's Lucy, isn't it? Yeah, thank you, Lucy. You mentioned in your presentation that there would be no impact on amenity, but I might question that, Lucy, actually, because I'm looking on the plans here. I'm looking at the entrance, and I think if you live at number 81, I think you will be severely impacted actually by cars coming and going. And I'm just wondering if it's possible to get. There was an image of a car that was parked on a bit of land, and I think it was suggested that that would be the entrance, but we'll see it in just a second. Yeah, that was really right. Yeah, there you go. Right. Now, I would suggest to you that that is not where the entrance is shown on the description at all. The description, the entrance as per the drawing on the on the planning application itself is more towards that hedge. If we can go back to the car, that slide we were just on. Yeah, right. So I would suggest looking at the drawing that's on the planning application. Actually, the entrance is going to be right on the edge of that hedge, and so therefore, all of the traffic that's going to be coming and going out of that development, the headlights are actually going to go straight into the ground floor. Well, they're bungalows, but the windows of number 81 across. So actually, I think if the entrance could be where that car is and this way a little bit. I think you would do away with the amenity. So I'm just wondering if if that is a possibility, because where it's shown, I'm looking at that diagram there, Councillor, where that's shown is not where that car is, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. The design utilises it. It's not exact same position, I agree, but it does utilise that existing hard standing for the access. We don't consider in this design that it would have a significant impact on amenity given sort of the distance. I don't think sort of in terms of headlights.
Right. So if I could just, Chair, if I could come back to that, and I appreciate that you might not agree with that, Lucy, but we as the committee have got to take the decision. We might think differently, and if that's the case, I just think, because actually I don't actually object to the principle of what we're trying to do here. I have got some issues around the process, and I have got to, I just think to myself, we're the landowner. Why would we impose a reduction of amenity on residents if we don't have to? So I'd be much happier if I thought that we might be able to move that driveway around a little bit. But anyway, I'll come back to debate on that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Hi. Yeah, could you give me some details on the environmental credentials in terms of carbon reduction and renewables, please?
Yep, so this scheme doesn't currently propose any renewable energy sources. Sort of as mentioned, it's not required for a scheme of this size, but we do, with these schemes, we take a fabric first approach, so maximising in terms of materials and components to ensure sort of the performances the performance of the dwelling sort of keeps energy levels low in first instance, which can have a reduction.
So are we going just as far as building control or going beyond that?
I think it's generally beyond that in terms of sort of insulation. But obviously we wouldn't have submitted that information with the planning application.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I was interested to see that the nearest space where a helicopter could land would be at the Stevenson Centre. Maybe I'm wrong, but I would have thought the playing field at Popkiln School would have been closer. Do we have any evidence of the distance? Thank you.
I don't think so, is the answer.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure about that. Because they don't have a particular landing locations as far as I'm aware. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how they choose that.
I do know the school quite well, and it's quite a large field and a playground, which I would hope if there was an emergency could be used. Thank you.
I think that we have the situation where the officers said that providing something for the air ambulance is very difficult because we don't know whether the air ambulance will be there tomorrow. So, whereas the implication is that there is a need for housing now, particularly bungalows. Councillor Beer, would you agree with? Thank you. Any more questions? No? Right, well, open it up for debate. Councillor Beer, you can kick off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to start by saying, yes, I accept bungalows are needed throughout the district, and we need them in Great Cornard because we have lots of houses and not enough bungalows. But, and I'll come back to that later, this isn't the place. First of all, there's been quite a few comments made about the air ambulance. I'll try and pick up some of them. I think the Popkiln School, if I remember rightly, they're acquiring or trying to get permission to infill the swimming pool area and enlarge that, so they might encroach a bit more onto that playing field, so that wouldn't be large enough. Secondly, the Stevenson Centre, which we did have the air ambulance land on recently when there was the fire at the Brook Hotel in Brook Pub in Great Cornard. It landed there, but the emergency services, to get to the recreation field, the Stevenson Centre, you have to sort of encounter a little one-way system. So it takes longer, and it would take longer. The field they use at the moment, despite the fact, and I accept what you're saying, Mr. Chairman, and the officers, that it could be gone tomorrow. It's been there now for 10 years, the air ambulance, and I think that most people would do everything to make sure that that keeps flying. So I think that's really a red herring. That is a place where it could land quite easily, the area it uses now. And it is important because the road there is the quickest connection to the Colchester, Bury St Edmunds Road. Either way you can go, and you can get to that very, very quickly from the area of where you're proposing to put these bungalows. So I would ask members to bear that in mind. I want to say about the residents that live up there. I think there was a slide which show the amount of bungalows along there. If you could just find it, I've made a note of so many slides that it's pointless. Not that one. Not that one. It's more like an aerial shot of the houses that are already there. That one. Go back one. Yeah. Now, there's 26 houses, bungalows. They're mostly bungalows opposite, and behind the site going up, they're bungalows and houses. Now, the mix of those people that live there, the residents, I would say, I have to be very careful here and not being disrespectful to anybody, they must be in the later age group, 50 plus. So it's predominantly an area of older population. and members should remember that Great Cornard's population is towards 10,000. It's the second largest populated area in Babergh District Council, larger than Hagley. And where this particular site is right in the middle, the centre part of the massive council housing estate that was proposed in the 1960s and 70s, formerly known as the GLC, which we now call as Shorelands. Most of those houses there that you can see were council owned. A lot of them are sold now, but a great majority of them are council owned. We've heard reference, and the reason why I'm now jumping a little bit, to Shorelands Wood, which is further along there. It's a good 200 metres away from here. I would say nearer 3. But that land, I believe, was county council, and they gave that to the parish council, or it's in Holden with the parish council, as Shorelands Wood, what do you call it for? Nature Reserve, that's the word, thank you. And so that was their help. The Stevenson Centre belongs, and the recreation ground, belongs to Great Cornard Parish Council. We have a lot of area down Blackhouse Lane, which is public playing fields, belonging to Great Cornard Parish Council. You've referred to the country park. That also belongs to Great Cornard Parish Council. The allotment field, which is a large site, that also belongs to Great Cornard Parish Council on behalf of the public of Great Cornard. Very little has been given by Babergh District Council. Very little of park, play areas and amenity areas. Great Cornard has provided, it's the greatest amount of amenity area than I would say any other village. And to have this imposed upon them, I don't think is right, because this area is an open space, and I think Councillor Barrett did question the point that whilst it isn't used for, say, a football game or a match and things like that because of the play area just across the road, bearing in mind that is more for 14-year-olds. There is some small play equipment there, but people tend to go on this little bit of land with small children, and they'll kick a little ball around, I've seen, and what have you. Yes, dog walkers do use it. I think also somewhere it said that you would be taking out the hedge that goes up along the Potkiln Road, and you'd be replacing that by putting it the other side on the road side, the main bit of road side. Well, that will spoil that sort of area with the visual impact, and I don't think that's good at all. Certainly the residents, and they come from far and wide in Great Cornard, have stopped me and contacted me that they think this is appalling to do away with this last little oasis of tranquility that we've got there in Great Cornard. Because if you put up that plan that you just had a moment ago, I think it was 22, you can see all around this, it is abutted by houses. We're densely populated, and whilst we have that little play area opposite, which we had to fight hard to get Babergh to put in equipment there and what have you, we've got this little open space. The locals believe this is protected and that it would be there for all time. And you're telling us that you don't have to implement a 1, 2, 3 on it and other things. I think the lack of communication has been very poor. There should have been discussions, but the general feeling from everybody, and they're unanimous, that this is not acceptable and that we shouldn't allow it. We shouldn't impose this here in Great Cornard. There are an immense amount of development that have gone on recently in Great Cornard, to the tune, I should say, of nearly 1,000 additional houses in the last 10 years. And here you are wanting to use up this little piece of land, and it is a small area, right in the centre. I think is appalling. But I may want to come back, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Busby.
Well, I think there's a number of issues there. We can't take, unfortunately, Councillor Beer's word that everybody is unanimously against it.
Peter?
Well, even that. We've had 3 people that have written in and 3 people have objected. And that's what we have to take into account. As for the helicopter, well, I can't believe we've ever discussed landing space for a helicopter in any other planning application ever. I'm a bit surprised it's taken up a so significant thing here. As for Lee, your traffic at night from the site for the bungalows, I presume, we were talking about 5 bungalows here, predominantly likely to be for elderly people. I can't believe there'll be more than 1 or 2 cars go in and out of there at night. It's not as though it's going to be the M25. So I don't think that's an issue. If you could put that slide back up where you show the land in the... what is that to the north-east where it says slide 4? Is that open space or are they houses up there? Sorry? It's open land? What's that, about 150 metres away or 100 metres away? So it's... Well, in that case, as part of that development, we need to make sure that there is sufficient open space.
Okay.
Well,
one at a time.
it isn't. I think we're making a bit of a mountain out of a molehill on this one, personally.
Thank you, Councillor Busby. Anyone else? Councillor Ayres.
Thank you, Chair. I tend to agree with Councillor Busby about the helicopter issue. We've not raised that before. There is a real need for bungalows, as often councillors do ask for, and I'm sure that they will be built with all the new conditions. Ecology has been addressed with the replanting, things like that. And I don't think this area would have been used for ball games. With my grandchildren, I wouldn't plant a bit of grass that hasn't got fencing around it, because you can guarantee the balls will go in the road. And they will plant new hedges. So I am for the development. Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Parker.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's really tricky, this one, because I absolutely understand the need to supply housing. For me, it does hinge on policy for me, and I understand in respect of designating open space, etc. The difficulty for me is that in this particular case, we own the site, we are the applicant, but we have identified in our own open assessment, open space assessment, that this is open space. And para 99A of the MPPF is absolutely clear about that you won't build on it. So there's the tension. Now, is there such a significant public benefit as to be able to support? It really is borderline. I mean, I'm a Cornard boy, lived in Cornard, born and raised in Cornard, on Pockhiln Road. I never ever, not once did I ever play on that piece of land. And I will just come back to the air ambulance. Me personally, I'm not saying that it doesn't land, but it doesn't land frequently there. It absolutely doesn't. So I think actually for a different reason, I think it's a red herring. But for policy reasons, I'm really struggling to be able to support this, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Councillor McLaren.
Thank you. Well, listening to all the dismissive comments about the air ambulance, perhaps it's never come up before, but that doesn't mean to say it's relevant. And I think it is an amenity for the people of Great Cornard. The comments about it being a charity and about to go out of business is immaterial. 50% of our social services are run by charities, so the fact it's got charitable status, I think, is a non-starter. But I think it is an amenity that they've got, and I think it would be a shame to lose it. Yeah.
Councillor Beer, you want to say?
Just to come back on that point of the air ambulance, I can assure you I have known of 2 occasions recently where the air ambulance has landed on that piece of ground. And the 3rd occasion was when they landed on the recreation ground for the last fire. And to suggest that we've never brought it up in any other application, we most likely haven't, because perhaps it hasn't arisen. But I can assure you, in this large populated area, the air ambulance, that is the only place that can really realistically land. And we should bear that in mind. Thank you.
Any other comments from anyone? Councillor Hinton.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I agree with certain opinions that the air ambulance is a bit of a red herring, but at the same time, this is designated open space under Regulation 19 in the submission to our draft local plan. The plan is being looked at the moment, and to say that it doesn't got any significantly reduces the weight that may be afforded to it is a bit spurious when you consider that virtually every week we are submitting new documents to support the local plan without any form of consultation with anybody. They seem to be appearing like moles in your garden when you've got a pristine lawn. We've got a deficit of open space within Great Cornard. We've got a policy which says that we shouldn't get rid of open space unless it's proved to be not required. And we've seen no evidence at all to say that that has been established. So I'm afraid I'd have to go along with the people who say that this application cannot be supported in its current form.
Councillor Barrett, do you want to comment? Yes.
Right. I'm very much in a dilemma over this because I would normally support this application with gusto in terms of 5 affordable housing and especially bungalows. Bungalow Pete to my left is obviously highly supportive of any bungalow, as we all know. But the problem that we have got, and I take Councillor Parker's point, and I think this is the issue. If this was what I would call an open market application, as opposed to the district council application, if I went to the planners and said I would like to build 5 bungalows on a piece of land that's been designated as amenity land, the pre-application advice I get would probably be, no, you can't build on that because it's community land. And I think that's where we fall in the stall. So, I mean, there is an advantage and there's a benefit to our community in terms of 5 houses. But equally, are we not being balanced in our view if we were to take the view, oh, well, the need outside, because it's us coming forward with social housing? And I think that's the dilemma that probably Councillor Parker and I find ourselves. On one hand, I can totally understand the requirement and the need, but equally, when I look at the map, and we've seen it on there, it is a very dense part of Great Cornard. It has very high levels of social housing to one side. They do not have a lot of open space. That is open space. Now, regardless of whether the use of that open space, but sometimes you've got to say, we're all talking about mental health. We're all talking about, being restricted or being stuck inside. And to be able to go out and maybe just stand in the middle of that open space and let the rain come down on top of you. Gosh, sounds like a film. But that is important. I know the chairman has raised his eyebrows because obviously he lives in Glemson, which has plenty of open space and it never rains. So, but I do feel that on balance, and this is the key thing, on planning balance, I think I would have to say, and also having had representation from many members of Great Cornard, I think on my planning balance would come down to say I do not approve of the application in its current state. And I would propose that we move to go against that with the recommendation that paragraph 99A takes priority.
I'll second that with great pleasure, Mr. Chair.
Fine. Any other comments?
May I just make a couple of points, Chair? Just so members can form their opinion as to vote. We've had the discussion about the open space. Glossary to the MPPF describes it thus. Open space is all open space of public value, including not just land but water, which offer important opportunities for sport and recreation and can act as visual amenity. So what one could take the view that it falls under that category. I think it's probably the lower end of the quality of, but it's, you know, you could say it falls under that category. In which case we do have to look at what was 97 in my MPPF is now 99, which shows that you should not build on such land unless, and I think 99A is important when it talks about the assessment. Our assessment shows that there is, if you include all the informal green space around, quite a surfeit of open space. And with the Cornard Tide development coming up, that will provide another 6 hectares, albeit that is the proportionate to what it should be. That's the 10%. So you could take the view that the assessment allows us to allow the development if we want to. So at that point, you then have to look at its planning merits. You have to weigh up the loss and the gain. Sorry, Chair. Sorry, Councillor Plum.
Can I add in also that the loss of the amenity open area, call it what you want, outweighs the benefits that you have suggested.
So that, members, I think is the judgment you have to make. If we accept that by the wording of the MPPF, we can find an argument to allow it because we've done what we should do. We're now on to the assessment. And Councillor Barrett made a point about us only being positive to this because it's a council application. I'm aware of that as an argument. I think we have to be aware of that. I think 2 things to say. Obviously, it's just going to be affordable housing, so there's no, it's not like a private developer profiting from it. It's for the good of the community in that sense. And the other thing to say is if it was a private developer and this is a private open space, how will we balance that? So we have to consider our application as if it were a third party, like in that sense. We have to be not too permissive, but not too unfair. So you really have to just weigh up the things in front of you. And I think probably the plus point we have to look at is the supply of affordable housing. We've got 100 plus people on the register, I think Councillor Osborne said that, and this provides 5 dwellings, which we can look to tie to local need. I need to speak to affordable housing about that. I think we do it by condition anyway, because it's a council project, so we don't have to get into 106s. We can just do it by condition. So those would appear to be the benefits, and I understand that you see some disbenefits. So if the focus could be on that, and ambulance is noted, but I wouldn't want to fight an appeal on that argument. We have to put that to one side.
No, I wouldn't expect you to fight an appeal on the ambulance.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Listening to that with interest, and that because in paragraph 99A it says an assessment has been undertaken which clearly shows that open space buildings or land to be surplus to requirements. It then goes on to say in B, the loss resulting from the proposed development will be replaced by equivalent or better provision in terms of quantity and quality in a suitable location. We haven't done any of those. We're not proposing. If that had been a private developer, we'd be saying we want some open space.
Councillor, it
to
says
go with
or. It just says or. It's not. It doesn't be all of those. It has to be. It's or. It's or.
Or.
Yeah.
But we haven't done anything to assess it. So it's a contrary to policy.
So does the proposer go along with you?
That was the benefit. The loss of the amenity area outweighs any benefits.
That sort of coincides with my theme.
Okay.
There are many other issues in Great Cornard that needs time spent on, like antisocial behaviour and park and areas.
Thank you. Can I ask you to...
Yes, Chair. I mean, obviously, it feels like we have to. We've got 17 minutes, unless we think we can't do it today. We're moving towards a vote. We need a discussion about if... Well, sorry, first of all, we're going for, do we agree with the officer? We'll do that first, and if that falls, then we'll have to talk about what we do next. Yeah.
All right, so your proposal and seconded at the moment is to reject the officers.
And the reason stated is...
Yep, the reason stated are the ones you made.
So we've actually got a reason, so the officer's got something to work with.
So we have a proposal and a seconder. You're all happy to go to a vote?
Sorry, we're proposing to refuse, are we?
Yes.
Chair. Sorry, could I have some headlines for that, just for probity, basically? So, your reasons for refusal are, please.
In line with that NPPF paragraph 99A stroke B, section 19 of the joint proposal.
Okay. I would suggest, Chair, if we're saying that it falls foul of that part of the NPPF, I think I've given an answer which suggests it doesn't. If you want us to go away and come back another time to say why we think that's not the case, we can do that.
It's subjective, really, isn't it?
It is, yes. I don't know whether the assets representative is able to add any more to this point. Sorry to put you under. No, you haven't got any more. Fair enough. Okay. So we're in a situation, Chair, where the councillors feel that that assessment has not taken place adequately. And that seems to be informing the reason for
Chairman, yes, also that, of course, it's contrary to regulation, our Regulation 19 submission to the joint local plan, and also contrary to the, when I can find the screen here.
I wouldn't go with the JLP still. I heard what you said about that, but it's still...
8.2 of the, paragraph 8.2 of the Babergh and Mid-Suffolk Open Space Assessment, which shows that there's a deficit of land in Cornard.
Not the JLP, Councillor Hinton, it's still got limited weight. I know it's getting a bit boring, it's gone for a long time, but it still has got limited weight.
If we have a look in our own local plan, we'll find there's something about open space in there.
Okay, I'm sure you will. At the moment, we have a proposal and a seconder. Let's put that to vote. And you have reasons for that.
The reason is that an adequate assessment hasn't taken place as per paragraph 99 of the NPPF. I've heard suggestions also about JLP, which I'd advise against, and also our own open space assessment.
You had the 2 points you made that covered them.
Does that cover the point that I've made that the benefits don't outweigh the loss of amenity area? Because quite often you say to us that we have to have this benefit.
So you're saying the balance is in...
You can have that as your second reason. I'm aware of timing, so normally we'd break away and get the wording for you. If we can agree that the headlines, you'll have to leave us to do the crafting. I'm just going to look towards the legal representative. That's Ian.
This is approved, we've got the sense of fear.
Okay.
So we're going with the fact that the paragraph 99 hasn't been complied with, and beyond that, looking at the planning balance, the loss of a space is not outweighed by the public benefits.
Councillor Parker did bring up and quote those, and I wasn't quick enough to write them down, but he did quote that why he felt at that time that he may not be able to support.
Yeah, that's fine. It's just getting a feeling to what your proposal is, which people will now vote on.
Yeah, we have that proposal, and now we'll take it to a vote. The vote should now be available for you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, that vote is now in progress in your app. Councillor Beer.
I'm recommending
Vote for refusal. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. That's 8 votes for refusal and 3 against.
Okay. You okay?
Got that.
Fine. Thank you very much. The next meeting will be on the 3rd of November, and don't forget site visit next week.